Hi there and welcome. It is so good to have you join me today for this recording of a webinar. Today we talked about some of the myths, some of the bad information that is out there about iridology, and we talked about why it's incorrect and what the correct information is. I hope you enjoy this, and if you do, drop a comment below. Thanks. So our topic today is dispelling myths, what we've learned from the past 50 years of research. And this is really important for us to talk about because there are a lot of people who are teaching and practicing based on old information that has since been disproved. And they're teaching it like it's current, like it's absolutely correct. And I'm here to tell you it's not. And I know that because I've been in iridology, and I'll introduce myself in detail in a few minutes, but I've been in iridology for over 4 decades, and I've seen how the research has moved things along. And I've seen how some people are stuck in the past and some people are moving forward. So we're going to look at a lot of the most common myths that are out there that people are using. We're going to start with the very first myth, and you've heard me tell this story many times if you've been with me for any length of time. The story goes that a young boy, an 11-year-old in Hungary named Ignaz von Petzl, found a bird of prey. I've heard owl, I've heard hawk. In the finding, somehow the bird broke a wing or a leg, and whether that was the boy trapped or captured or whatever, and he managed to gather this bird up and take this bird home to nurse it back to health. In the process, what he saw was he noticed a black line in the owl's eye that gradually disappeared as the injury healed. So I have a lot of concerns and questions about this story, because one would think that if that was something that actually happened and could be replicated, that veterinarians would have seen it by now, right? How many bird sanctuaries are there where injured birds are taken to the sanctuary to be nursed back to health and then rehabilitated and released? Wouldn't somebody have noticed something like this in those birds, because they are working up close and personal as they nurse these birds back to health? Bill Cardona, who is my constitutional iridology instructor, said this: modern iridology can't explain the owl story. Von Petzl's story from a very long time ago has not been reproduced. So it is just a waste of time to repeat it. It just creates confusion. Critical thinking is required when applied to any topic. So that is a really important perspective. And Bill goes on to say, if you look at a picture of an owl's eye or most any animal, the structure of the iris is different from humans. There is no anterior stroma, so there's no surface layer of trabecula of fiber structure, just a smooth posterior leaf without individual strands of fiber. So it is structurally impossible to have the event that Ignaz says he saw. Now, having said that, just want to put this out there, that we are still grateful to Ignaz, because whatever he saw in that bird's eye triggered him, so that when he was an adult, he became a doctor, and he started literally drawing out his patients' eyes in colored charcoal by hand and correlating their stories and started to map out the iris as we understand it now. So as I mentioned earlier, I have been an iridologist for over 4 decades, and I am currently one of 5 level 3 certified iridology instructors in the world with the IPA organization. These badges are issued every 2 years when we submit our updates and our CEUs and show that we have maintained our standards. In order to be a level 3 certified iridologist and iridology instructor, I had to be a level a comprehensive instructor first, which is level 1 and 2, and then had to do the training to do level 3, and then had to pass the certification exam for level 3. So it's a rigorous process. It's not an easy process at all. I got into holistic healing for over 4 decades ago, because I had health problems that the medical world was not answering. At that time, I met a young man who knew a little bit about herbs. He knew a bit about nutrition. He knew a bit about iridology. He was absolutely handsome. He was sweet. He was funny. Yes, I married him, and we're still married now, which is fantastic. But I took what he gave me and I ran with it, and I studied wherever I could and have filtered through that information and dumped what doesn't work. And when I say that, it doesn't work in my practice where I am, right? Because those things might work for somebody else in another part of the world where the climate is different, because the things that work in a dry climate, like what I'm in, don't behave the same in a damp climate like you'd get in Florida, right? So that's an important recognition there. I've also, over the many years that I've been a practitioner, I have written several books that I've self-published and self-distributed. They're all out of print now, except for the last one. So Pregnancy Naturally, the Herbal Birth Kit Handbook, Healthy Kids Naturally, The Essential Guide to Nature Sunshine Products, Biokinesiology and Color Therapy Level 1 and 2, and the most recent one is the Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology Textbook, and that is available only to students in my course. I've also designed and taught courses, many of them to go with the books. I've done designed and taught Herbology Level 1 and Level 2, which was a total of 36 hours of practical application of what can you use herbs for that you buy in a health food store. So we weren't talking about wildcrafting, we weren't talking about preparing, we were simply talking about you're buying your herbs already dried or already tinctured or already made into combinations. What can they be used for? Very practical class. Also designed and taught Biokinesiology and Color Therapy Level 1 and 2. For a while, I was a certified prenatal educator, so I designed and taught prenatal classes. And of course, now I am really neck deep in loving and teaching iridology. And so the dynamic iridology program, which I will introduce to you at the end of our time together today, is an IPA approved program that covers everything you need to prepare to certify as a comprehensive iridologist with IPA. So stay with me till the end and we will introduce that a little more fully. I'm also a nutritionist. I have training that allows me to be affiliated with the Canadian Association of Holistic Nutrition Professionals and the Canadian Association of Natural Nutrition Professionals. I'm also a master herbalist and I'm a member of the Alberta Herbalist Association. And on all these, I'm a professional member. Now, so good to have you joining us. Our group is growing as people are logging on. This is wonderful. Thank you for being there. If you are a health professional, so if you do have training in nutrition or herbology or naturopathy, if you at least have a college level anatomy and physiology course under your belt already, and you've got a transcript that shows that, and that's an IPA requirement for certification, but it's also my requirement because that's the level of student I want to teach. I encourage you to stay with me right to the end because I do have a special invitation for you. Are you ready to learn a little iridology, a little bit about the myths that are out there? If you are ready to learn about some of the myths that are out there and what the correct information is, give me the word myths in the chat box. Give me the word myths, M-Y-T-H-S. And again, as we continue on in our time together today, I encourage you to post questions, post comments. The more you interact with me through that chat box, the more information you're going to get from me, because that shows me that you're actually awake and you're paying attention and you're engaged and you're not actually, I don't know, scrolling social media or something else. There we go. They're coming in now. Thank you so much for that. Susan and Tara and Angie, thank you for letting me know that you are ready to learn about myths. And Angie and Christina, fantastic. That's brilliant. Wonderful. Thank you for that. Really appreciate that. All right. You are going to see people on social media saying that eyes change, that you start with an eye that looks a certain way, do a fruit diet or a raw food diet or a juice fast, and you are going to clear things out of the iris. Couple of things to note. Number one, the iris does not itself give up markings. It does not give up pigment. It accumulates pigment. This is a really important concept. The irides change generally very slowly. We're not going to see a change of accumulation, not even a change of accumulation in a few weeks. We're likely going to see it over months or years. Now, again, the sclera does change, and it can change quite quickly. And it can show us where things are not behaving properly, but it can also show us when things are correcting. And so it's important to know that what we see in the iris is genetic. What we see in the sclera is dynamic. Remember that what we see in the iris can appear to be slightly different based on what we see in the sclera. So if the sclera is very cloudy, if it's bloodshot, if it's very jaundiced, if we're seeing lots of other things in the sclera, that's going to alter how we see the iris. You saw many years ago, there was those popular memes on Facebook where it showed the picture of the running shoe or the dress, and it said, is this pink or is it blue? I think it was. And everybody had a different perspective. Part of that was because computer monitors display color differently. Part of it was because we each perceive color differently. And depending on the colors that are in an image, you will see it differently from how I see it. You'll interpret it differently from how I interpret it. But we also have that challenge of, if this is much more yellow with jaundice, it's going to change how this blue of the iris appears. Okay, so the appearance, color, clarity, or lack thereof in the sclera is going to impact what we see in the iris, how we interpret what we see in the iris. The second thing is, again, the iris accumulates. Now, these are the same person. These pictures are the same person. Pictures taken just over 20 years apart. Different cameras. Note that. This was an incandescent flash. This was an LED flash. Incandescent is more yellow. LED is more blue. That's going to alter the color. The fact that we have different cameras where the white balance might be set differently is going to impact how the image colors show. So I can call this a before and after. I can say, look at how much less yellow there is in the newer picture than there was in the older picture, and I would absolutely be lying. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? What we actually see here is a couple of things. Number one, different technology means color manifests differently. We see it differently. Number two, the pupil is smaller because this light is brighter. That is going to stretch the iris fiber out. And if you remember something like pantyhose, do you remember pantyhose? I still have some. Okay. You know, in the package, it looks pretty opaque, but when you put it on and you stretch it out, it looks more sheer. That's exactly what happens here. As we stretch out the fibers, it spreads the pigment out over a bigger area, which makes it look more sheer. Angie's saying totally makes sense between the different cameras. Thank you, Angie. You would be surprised how many people with different iridology training do not recognize that. They think that if it's a before and after picture are always accurate. It doesn't matter the camera. It doesn't matter the lighting. Nothing else matters. These are both pictures, therefore they're accurate. No, they are not. No, they are not. Oh my goodness. What I do want you to notice here is that in that ensuing 23 years, notice how he has acquired pigment. Do you see this dark patch down here going from about 30 minutes and it fades out up to about 41, 42 minutes? We have none of that in the original photo. That's not a photographic gimmick. This is what has accumulated in his iris over time. The color of the pigment tells us which organ is genetically cued to be having challenges, and the placement tells us how other organs are likely going to be impacted. All right, so this is a really important thing for us to notice, that there's no way for us to wash this out. We can't cleanse him, we can't fast him, we can't do anything holistically to get rid of that pigment. It is there for good because it's there because of genetic cues. This is a genetically cued thing, just like my hair starting to turn gray 10 years ago was genetically cued. I have some control over that with nutrition, but I'm probably not going to be able to completely stall it off. Is that making sense? If that is making sense, give me a makes sense in the comments box. Fantastic, Angie. Thank you for that. Anyone else find that this is making sense for you? Is this challenging anything you've seen elsewhere? Love to know if it's challenging you in some way, challenging something that you've been taught, that you've seen, that you've maybe even believed. All right, let's look at this set of eyes. These are my eyes. And Tara's saying it's challenging things she's heard. Yes, I'm doing my job right. These are my eyes. March, and I take pictures of my eyes fairly consistently just because I want to monitor things. Now, I want you to know that, that again, same camera, same lighting, but I'll explain why the colors are different here in just a moment. So in 2017, I just took pictures of my eyes because I'd got a new camera set up and I was having fun practicing with it, got these photos. I want you to look specifically right here and notice these lines. You may have heard some people talk about healing lines coming into an eye when things heal, or like the owl story, when there's a broken bone or a surgery, there's going to be a mark that shows up that shows there's a break that needs to heal. Well, early in March 2019, it was just a couple of days before this, I want to say March 12th, it might have been a bit later than that, I slipped on some ice and I broke my wrist in 2 places. So this is within 5 days of breaking my wrist. There is no difference between this image and this image. None whatsoever as far as that arm area goes. Those breaks required a double surgery. So in the 3 hours I was out cold, thank goodness for modern medicine, 2 incisions, 2 plates installed in my wrist to hold those bones where they needed to be. So that's all fine and dandy. Then on Mother's Day of the same year, so 10 weeks later, I fell downstairs at my son's house. Never wear high heels on stairs. Just saying, learned my lesson. And I landed on my elbow and I broke the olecranon off. So another trip to the emergency room. You can't set that externally. They put me in a cast for 24 hours till they could get an OR for me. But notice, so this is just a few days after that. It's another break. It's in the arm, and there is still no difference in the fiber here. There's no black line. No black line. Another surgery, hardware installed, wires and pins and little things to hold that olecranon onto the elbow or onto the arm. And a few 2 months later, we see the exact same image. So why are these a different color than these? Because these were done, I matched the camera settings up for shutter speed and for f-stop on these ones. I had the presence of mind to do that, but by the time I got down here, I did not have the presence of mind to check those settings. So this was done on slightly different camera settings. So not only does a different camera make the difference, but a different f-stop, different shutter speed will also change the output. So that's why the color looks different in these eyes. What we're really looking for is the fiber structure. And you would think with 3 broken bones, 3 sets of hardware, all within 10 weeks, wouldn't you think that that arm area would show something in the eyes, some kind of trauma? Oh my goodness, but it didn't. It did not. It did not. So in the wrist, 2 plates, 12 screws, in the elbow, wire and pins to hold things together. It's healed up nicely, and so this is a good thing. Good thing. All right. So we've already touched on this earlier. So actually, I want to just pop back here for just a moment. Have you heard people say, oh, you've had a surgery? I can see you've had a surgery by looking at someone's eyes. Have you heard people say that? If you have, give me surgery in the comments box. I have never in my over 4 decades seen, oh, good, Angie, I'm glad you haven't heard that. I've never in my time seen anyone and worked with anyone who's had a surgery who had a corresponding mark in the eye. Some people will say you'll accumulate a pigment spot there. Well, my pigment spots all stayed the same. You can't see one of them here because the light is obliterating it. But it doesn't. it's not going to give you a mark where you had a surgery. The reason being, the irides are genetic. Surgery doesn't change my genes. If I was young enough to conceive a child when I had a broken arm, that child would not be born with a broken arm, right? The iris is genetic. All right. So when we talk about pigments, we touched on this a little bit earlier, where people say, I did this fantastic cleanse, look at the difference in my eyes now, there's no pigments, they're so much clearer. And typically what happens there is the sclera can become much clearer, but the iris doesn't. Now, this is interesting because you're going to see that a lot, that people make these claims. Many years ago, and this is one of the things that maybe changed from Jensenian iridology to constitutional iridology, was a person, an author, whom I had tremendous respect for. I loved her books. I read her books. I studied her books. She was a holistic healer. She was an iridologist. She had a fabulous book. A couple of years after her iridology book had been released, and I'm not going to give you her name because I don't believe in slinging mud, she was pinned down and revealed that her before and after photos were the result of using color filters. That she'd been taught that the eyes would change, but she knew it would take a long time if they ever did. So to meet her print deadline, she used color photos to mock up after photos. That broke my heart, totally broke my heart, broke my trust, almost made me leave iridology until I heard about constitutional. And that's another reason why I am very clear when I'm showing photos that are before and after, to point out the differences in technology that mean that we can't do a straight across comparison here. We cannot cleanse toxins out. We accumulate toxins, as we've mentioned earlier, with this exact set of photos, but we cannot cleanse the pigments out. Pigments do not equal toxins. Pigments equal genetic predispositions to specific kinds of imbalances, right? They show us where a body has an organ that genetically is cued to have an imbalance. And the pigments, again, show us which other organs are going to suffer the fallout for that. That's what pigments show us. So when I see this and I see that we have acquired pigments here, this says to me, I want to support this person's liver ongoing. I want to make sure that if there are things in the daily nutrition that could support the liver, that this person is doing that. Maybe I'm going to put this client on a rotating program of different kinds of liver support, where they do a certain program of herbs for maybe 3 months, and then we're going to switch them to some other liver herbs for 3 months, and another batch of liver herbs for 3 months, and we're maybe going to rotate through 3 or 4 cycles so that the liver is always supported, but supported in different ways on an ongoing basis. Henry Wolff, who is another mentor of mine in constitutional iridology, said, in fact, it's bogus and a dogma only found out among some holdouts from the Lindlar, Kritzer, and Jensen schools of thought. The notion that certain metals, minerals, toxins routinely show up as diagnostic indicators in the iris has long been refuted and proven unreliable. There is no evidence to support the notion that heavy metal toxicity is measurable in the iris, likewise drugs, candida, etc. The dark spots here, again, are genetically predetermined. The body knows when these are going to show up in the iris, and we understand what these are now telling us. Can you make lacunae disappear with cleansing? And so here again, what I want to show you is not a lacuna. Well, actually, we've got lacunae in here, so this is a good example. I did not mislabel this. So these, again, same person. You can see it is the same person. We've got all the same markings in here, taken with a different illuminator. I've got 2 different illuminators, 2 different light setups for my camera. They're both LED. This one is just, well, I have some control over it, but it's hard to regulate. This one self-regulates. It senses how much light is coming back off the image we're shooting, and it adjusts the lighting appropriately. So what I want you to look at is the lacunae that are sitting here inside the collarette. You could see that they are long and thin. Here, those same lacuna look short and fat. They've been compressed. Think of this as like a balloon that you would make party animals out of. Here, the balloon is just long and stretched out, but here we've compressed it. Susan is saying, did you say the liver needs work because of brown spots or the orange brownish color? Both, right? And I'm not saying it needs work. I'm saying it needs support. And I'm simply clarifying that for you, Susan, because some people would say if it needs work, that means there's an active problem. When we see the pigment, it suggests that there is a genetic predisposition. There may or may not be an active problem, and that is determined by our client's symptoms. When I see pigment has accumulated, pointing to a specific organ, I want to support that organ. Did that help, Susan? Did that give you maybe more information than you needed? Great, thank you so much. Fantastic. And so when we see this, it's important to remember that in the iris, we have a certain amount of tissue going from pupil to limbus, a certain amount of tissue. If the pupil gets bigger, that amount of tissue gets compressed into a smaller area, right? So we have what looks like a narrower iris here, but where did the tissue go? In order for it to fit in, it has to do convolutions. And as it does convolutions, things displace slightly. So I want you to think of this, well, just like you're taking a piece of fabric that you've laid on the table, and as you push the ends of it together, what does that fabric do? It forms ripples, right? That's exactly what happens here. And as it forms ripples, it makes these lacunae look wider, right? You've just taken that balloon that's this long and you've squished it. Well, the air inside has to go somewhere, so that balloon is going to get fatter. It's not that the volume has changed. It's simply that the shape has been temporarily modified. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Yeah, Angie, thank you for that. Amazing. So again, the pupil shape is going to help us understand that lacunae do not change shape or size. They simply change appearance temporarily. Back when I first studied iridology, they would have looked at this and gone, oh, that's awful. They've gone from these very narrow lacuna to fat lacuna. This person is getting worse. Or if we had reversed these photos and lied about the dates, they would have said, look at how fat those lacunae were. They're getting skinnier. They're getting so much better. Healing is happening. All that has changed is the light. We are not going to make lacunae disappear. They are genetically set. They might disappear 2 or 3 generations down the road if this bloodline continues to do really positive work to strengthen their genetic material. So if this person does the right things now to strengthen his body and then goes on to father children, this is a young man, hopefully his wife is doing the same, then their children hopefully are going to receive better genetic material, stronger, maybe not perfect, but better in some ways. And so we might see this lacuna get passed down if that's in the genes that get passed on, but we might see it a little bit paler, a little bit smaller. We might see that there is some strengthening in there. Parasites. How many of you have seen, you've got parasites? Have you seen that online? If you've seen parasites, someone declaring, I can tell you you've got parasites, you need to do a parasite cleanse, give me the word parasites in the chat box. Interesting. Tara's seen that. Love it. I'm going to tell you the only way you see parasites in an eye is if they are actually physically in the eyeball. And there are certain parasites that live in the sclera, just under that top layer of the sclera, and you can see these wormy things. They're really gross, really gross. I've only ever seen pictures. I hope I never see them in real life. What other people are talking about is they're talking about these black lines, and they're saying these are parasite lines. These are not parasite lines. These are called radial furrows, and they are simply a separation in that anterior stroma that Bill Cardano was mentioning earlier. They tell us there is a weak link in that organ, and they tell us that there is likely an interruption in the nerve feed in that organ. They tell us that this person may be capable of holding toxins there, but not a guarantee of it, because we don't know what this person is doing for their health. Maybe this person has the cleanest diet and the healthiest lifestyle for their body ever possible. Then it's highly unlikely they are holding toxins. This would then simply be a genetic marking saying, mind your manners, behave yourself, take good care, right? If, on the other hand, this is someone who has a really awful diet, I get facetious when I say the Twinkies and Coca-Cola diet, a really awful diet, they're not taking care of themselves at all, then they may be holding on to garbage here. Okay. That garbage could be a good place for parasites to decide to live, but parasites don't change your genetic structure. So we do not see anything in the iris that says you have parasites. Okay. Harry Wolff says American sources from the turn of the 20th century are very unreliable, repetitive, and very misleading, with silly and debunked notions like drug spots, psoriatic itch spots, healing lines, parasite lines, and brown eyes turn blue with detox. So people often ask which iridology chart is correct. Everybody's got their own iridology chart. And I'm going to tell you, it absolutely depends on what your goals are with iridology. Now, why do I say that? In constitutional iridology, we are concerned primarily with organs that affect metabolism, with body parts that affect metabolism. So I'm not really interested in arms, hands, legs, feet, right? Because they don't necessarily change metabolism. Not the way liver, pancreas, stomach, brain, blood circulation, things like that do. So Bill Cardano designed a chart many years ago and gave me permission to update it. And I'm going to share with you a link. There you go in the chat box. You can download a copy of this dynamic iridology map. You will notice that it only has organs on it. We do know that there is an area that teaches us about bones. That would be this light blue, green, turquoise, aqua band here, which is the osseous zone. But we don't focus on, like I said, things that don't have a metabolic impact. And so we also don't focus on things that are not dictated by genetic inheritance. This is why it's so important to understand anatomy and physiology, right? Because as we understand how the organs work together, and as we understand the different marks in the eyes, we are, oops, you know what? My apologies. Thank you for that, Tara. We are able to, there we go. We are able to understand how things work together, and we're able to understand where we need to be addressing issues, right? Not that we're doing it to change what the eyes look like, because ultimately, who really cares what the eyes look like, except for doing an assessment, right? We care about our clients' health. We care about them seeing improvements in their well-being. All right, sorry about posting that link to the wrong place. Hopefully you're seeing it now. And go ahead and download this chart, because it's a good, clean, simple chart. When we look at many of the charts that are out there, some of the areas on the chart are subdivided into such tiny, tiny spaces that it's nearly impossible to even match them up with that part of the eyeball. So this is just so much easier to use. Another question is brown pigment in a blue eye an indication of toxicity? Is yellow pigment an indication of sulfur buildup? The answer is no and no. Brown teaches us about liver and liver potentials. Yellow teaches us about kidney and kidney potentials. And there are other colors too. We won't dive into those right now. But each color tells us about an organ that wants to be out of balance, and the placement of that pigment tells us which organ is going to be impacted the most by that imbalance. And so we want to understand that, because when we understand that and layer that up with our clients' symptoms, we then get a clear picture of why they have the symptoms they have and what the root cause of the problem likely is and the best way to address it. We all know, pretty sure everybody here has got enough background to know that a headache is a symptom. It's not the problem, right? Just before we flip to the next slide, I would love it if you would share with me what is one cause of a headache that you know of. I can list 5 or 6. I want to know, what is a cause? What is something that you know will cause a headache? Tension. That's a good one, Angie. Absolutely. So muscular tension. What is something else that can cause a headache? Constipation, Tara. I love that one. I have fixed so many headaches by clearing up constipation. It's brilliant. A rotated CI. Absolutely. A subluxation. Brilliant. What else do you know of? Mucus. Yeah, mucus congestion can sure cause a headache. What else? Anything else? Dehydration. Ooh, that's a good one. Mold toxicity. Yes, yes. Magnesium deficiency. I mean, you guys are brilliant. You are so brilliant. Look at all that. So someone comes in with a headache. This is why we don't just give them white willow, right? Or peppermint oil. Yeah, we might give that to them to Band-Aid it, but that's not fixing the problem, right? We want to figure out, why do they have the problem? And so that's where understanding iridology and talking to our client to understand their diet and lifestyle can all help us to understand what we need to suggest to fix the headache. Does that make sense? That the symptom is only a symptom. The eyes and a conversation also help us to understand where the root of the problem is. Another extra question, is white in blue iris an indication of scarring or stagnant lymph? The answer is no. So when we see white in an iris, and when they say, is it an indication of scarring, again, they're suggesting that you're going to see white because there was an injury, right? Or that you're going to see white clouds because this person drank too much milk and that congested their lymphatic system. The answer is absolutely not to any of these. Again, we've already talked about injuries, right? And so as we look at the rest of this, what we see in the eye is a genetic predisposition. So when we see lots of white, it tells us this person is prone to being over acid. Does it mean they are over acid? Not necessarily. Find out about their diet, find out about their lifestyle, find out if they're doing things that would help them fulfill this predisposition, right? They will have symptoms that go with it. So, typically if they have a lymphatic or a blue eye and they're doing a lot of dairy, they will usually be mucousy, and that is acid, right? So they're over acid. They are doing the things to create the response. I've had lots of blue-eyed people who have no problems with being over acid and mucousy and inflamed because they are not doing things that feed the problem, right? Angie's saying she's heard the milk theory. And so often, when we're working with a lymphatic or blue-eyed person, we want to ask them what their diet is, because we see that predisposition to the lymphatic system wanting to be congested. We see that predisposition to the body wanting to have inflammation, right? But we need to understand, what are they doing that would make that actually happen? Can we diagnose diseases using iridology? If you're a licensed medical practitioner, I guess you've got that leeway, However, it's never wise. Iridologists, as a rule, do not diagnose from an eye. We use the eyes to guide the questions we are going to ask. We combine what we see in the eyes with the client's symptoms, with their diet and lifestyle. That gives us that full picture understanding so that we can give them the best information. But we're never naming a disease. Like, I would never say to someone, your eyes say you have this problem. I can say, when I've seen this problem in the past, those clients have had a diagnosis of such and such. Now, I'm not saying you've got that diagnosis, but I'm saying you've got the same symptoms and you've got the same eye markings. So I'm thinking we need to work this way with you, right? Because I don't have that licensing to be able to diagnose or prescribe. I studied Jensenian iridology at the outset, way back in the late 70s, early 80s. I did a lot of diagnosing from the eyes back then because I was told I could. And the interesting thing was I was usually wrong, right? And that wasn't good. And that was another reason why I nearly quit iridology. Again, with constitutional, we ask questions, we assess the eyes based on the information we have, and we use the eyes to trigger more questions so that we can understand how this body is working. What I really love about this is it helps me to create a really deep rapport with my clients. Because now, instead of asking shotgun pattern questions, instead of asking my clients all the very same questions, I am asking them questions specifically that relate to them based on their symptoms and their eyes. Bill Cardona said this: iridology cannot be used to diagnose. It is a unique assessment tool to gain understanding of the blueprint of the body, including tendencies towards illness patterns or assessment of resiliency and resistance against negative influences. But diagnosing the presence of or status of illness disease is never appropriate. So Kat is saying, so can you see the MTHFR gene mutation? We see a strong predisposition to it. There's a strong correlation for specific colors in the eye and MTHFR. My experience has been that when I've seen those markings and those clients have had genetic testing, it has come back affirmative. Okay, and so there is a strong correlation, but still, unless you are a medically licensed professional, you can't say that. You can't say this marking means you have this disease, this genetic anomaly. You can say, when we see this particular thing in the eye, there's a strong correlation to MTHFR. Do you hear the difference in the wording, Kat? That's really important. So for the past several years, I've been teaching wellness practitioners like you the art and science of constitutional iridology. And registration is now open for the course that starts in January. So I'd love to share details of that course with you now. And I know you didn't come here for a long commercial, so I'd like to do this really quickly with your permission. Some questions that I want to answer as we do that is, first one is, how long does it take to learn iridology? Well, if you want to learn iridology at a professional level, it's going to take more than a weekend, right? In those weekend classes, you learn 1 mark equals 1 problem, and that's very, very limited. Most of those weekend courses do not require you to have an understanding of anatomy and physiology, so it's really not a good in-depth course. We need to understand how the organs work together in order for us to understand iridology at a really deep level. And so we want to make sure that we are using iridology as an assessment tool. And my course is 45 hours long plus optional mentoring, right? So it takes time. Just before I answer the next question, Kat is saying, so you can indicate a detox issue. Well, again, not necessarily, Kat, because if we see a marking that suggests MTHFR, you can't detox MTHFR out, right? Because it's a genetic anomaly. And so you don't see the need to detox in the eye, in the iris. You might see indications in the sclera, but not in the iris. You would see the indications in the symptoms and correlate the symptoms to the markings, then to understand what you need to be recommending for your client, whether it's, and I don't like to do detoxes anyways. I like to do lifestyle work. So rather than putting someone on a 10-day detox or a month-long detox, I like to get them working with their diet and their lifestyle so that they are constantly doing the right things for their body. Does that make sense, Kat? While you're answering that, question number 2, can I earn a living with iridology? Well, it's important to know that iridology is not a standalone tool. If all you've got is iridology and you don't have nutrition, you don't have herbology, you don't have a modality to go with it, it's not going to work. And I get lots of people that have done courses somewhere asking, will I mentor them? And it's like, no, because you don't have a modality and I didn't teach you iridology. I don't know what you know, right? And so it's like if your car is making a funny noise and you take it to the garage and the guy there says, I know what the problem is. That would be someone who's learned iridology, but I don't know how to fix it. That would be someone who knows iridology and doesn't have a modality. I only do the assessment of your car here. You have to take it to Joe down the street. He does the fixing, right? So would you do that? Would you really want to be bothered to go one place to get the assessment and another place to get the recommendations? So we really want to make sure that you've got a modality that works well with iridology. And if you've got that, then yeah, you can make a living with iridology. You can. Iridology, a few people know about it, so you can do your marketing focusing on that. You're better off to pick a problem that you solve and market to the problem, and incorporate nutrition or herbology and iridology in the solution of the problem for your client. And we talk a lot about that in the extra mentoring that I offer my students, because we do talk a lot about marketing and business principles to support you in being successful. Question number 3, I found a course that is taught from books and videos. Good enough? No. There are so many nuances with iridology. Can you really learn from a book what questions you need to ask this person? Can you really learn what are the best recommendations to make for this person? Can you learn those really fine nuances from a book or a video? I don't think so. I think we learn those best in an interactive platform, right? Books don't allow you to individualize things. 2 people can have the same marking, and that marking can mean a couple of different things based on each person's background and history and lifestyle. So I think it's always best to have a live instructor, and to have an instructor who's not just teaching classes live, and that can be live on a webinar like this, but I think it's important to have an instructor who wants to mentor you, who wants to support you as you put what you're learning into practice, so that they can help answer questions and give you guidance as you build what you're doing. Does that make sense? Does having a mentor, a teacher and mentor sound like a good way to learn? If it does, give me the word mentor in the comments box. Is that something that you would value? So the next Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course is starting on January 12th. I only accept students into this course if I've spoken with them personally. I want to vet my students to make sure they've got the anatomy and physiology, and to make sure that we have a good chemistry. I think the chemistry between teacher and students in the class is critical. If there's not a good chemistry, learning's not going to happen. That is so important to me, that we have a good community feel here. The goal here is to teach you iridology at a level that will allow you to get client protocols created in your client session, so you're not working overtime to create client protocols. You're getting it done right here, right now, in a way that will encourage the clients to come back to get more and come back to get more. So it encourages long-term retention. What if I've done iridology for 30 years and have lots of recommendations of clients from others? Do you have an advanced training or mentorship? Susan, Everybody has to start here. If you've done it for 30 years, you probably have Jensenian, not constitutional. And in order for me to mentor or to even take you into my level 3 class, you've got to have the constitutional foundation, because I don't reteach those things in mentorship or in the advanced class. And believe me, the principles are different enough that if you don't have the constitutional foundation, it's not going to be a comfortable situation for you. You've learned constitutional. Well, let's have a conversation and see where we go. I'd like to know more about, and to do this privately, I'd like to know more about who your teacher was and things like that, so that we can see if it's a good fit for you or not. So the next course starts on January 12th. And again, and Susan, this is a link you could use. Use this link, tinyurl.com/dynamic-iridology-insight. Let's see where that goes. And that's how you get more information about the course, how we figure out if this is a good fit for you or not, right? And it's just so important to me. You know, way back when I was just starting, I would take anybody. And again, if it's not a great fit for whatever reason, it really affects the whole class. So I just want to make sure that it is a super fit so everyone has a great experience. Are you ready? This is what Mike Knapp said. He's a naturopath from Arizona. I asked him, why did he enroll in dynamic iridology? He said the interactive online platform with an experienced teacher and practitioner was what drew him to me. You said the fundamentals of iridology could be learned in this format, and that's what was delivered, plus a lot more on how to integrate it directly into current practice. I'm very happy with the training, so thank you. And then he goes on to talk about how he wanted to integrate it. So again, here you go. The next course starts on January 12th. Again, it's a 20-week program. We meet for class once a week for about 2.25 to 2.5 hours. And live interactive small group, never more than 10 students in a class, so that we have a lot of time to practice and to work together to make sure everything is working really well for you. If you are interested in more information, if you think that yeah, this sounds good, I think I might want to go that direction. I'm not saying committed, but are you leaning towards it? And you have anatomy and physiology under your belt already, then use this link. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about the course, the curriculum, tuition, what the commitment is for you for time. Let's make sure that this is where you want to go. If you want to learn iridology at a professional level, then let's talk. This is not a weekend party program kind of class, right? You're not going to learn party tricks here. You're going to learn iridology at a level that you can use as a professional. So with that, my friends, thank you so much for being with me today. I love the interactions. Thank you for the questions and for playing with me in my sandbox. And while we're at it, I hope you have a fabulous Christmas. And if you don't celebrate Christmas, what I want you to hear in that message is I'm sending you love and best wishes for a wonderful week or two while everybody else is doing their thing. But for now, I hope you do have a Merry Christmas. How was that? What did you learn? I would love it if you would share a comment below about your biggest aha moment, your biggest takeaway from this video. I'd also love it if you would subscribe to my channel. That helps this video and my videos to be shown to more people. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.